So there's this movie coming out, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called Spider-Man Homecoming, and it's going to feature a young Peter Parker. And early buzz has indicated that it might actually feel more like a John Hughes movie than an action flick. And if that's the case, a huge element is going to be the love life of Peter Parker. I wonder what girlfriend they're going to introduce. Gwen Stacy again? Mary Jane again? Maybe both? Maybe some new character? How many girlfriends has Peter Parker had anyway? You know what? Let's go over that. But just the main universe stuff. No alternate realities or ultimates. The first love interest for Peter Parker, I think, comes in the form of Liz Allen, Flash Thompson's steady girlfriend and Peter Parker's high school crush at Midtown High. Aside from being a tormentor of Peter Parker alongside Flash Thompson, her boyfriend, Liz Allen carries the distinction of being the first potential love interest for Peter Parker that was introduced all the way back in Amazing Fantasy 15 in 1962. And while Liz and Flash initially enjoyed making fun of Peter Parker for his nebbish behavior and his bookworm habits, they would eventually see a softer side to Peter Parker in his dotage for his elderly Aunt May, not to mention his growing confidence as a result of being Spider-Man. In fact, throughout their lives in high school together, Liz Allen would actually drop flirtatious hints that she was interested in Peter, though Peter, of course, was a little too distracted to notice. And not just from being Spider-Man, because in Amazing Spider-Man number 4 in 1963, while working as a freelance photographer for the Daily Bugle, he met a young, beautiful receptionist named Betty Brant. Although I think that calling her a receptionist may be selling the character a little too short. She was more of a Gal Friday, or an essential component that made the Daily Bugle run. She was an information gatherer, and looking for a stable, normal kind of guy. Somebody like mild-mannered Peter Parker. Unfortunately, due to his commitments as Spider-Man, he kept missing dates, and as such, Betty Brant felt marginalized, and so she did what any self-respecting, young, working, available woman would do. She broke it off, and eventually the two became more of a brother-sister kind of relationship. In Amazing Spider-Man number 25, it was implied that there might just be another girl out there for Peter Parker if Aunt May and her friend Anna Watson had anything to say about it. And it wouldn't be until Amazing Spider-Man number 31 in 1965 that we would be finally introduced to Gwendolyn Maxine Stacy, better known as just Gwen Stacy. This romance would blossom during Peter's first years at college at Empire State University. And it wasn't without its trials and tribulations. Gwen dropped subtle hints that she was interested in Peter romantically. However, Aunt May was in the hospital at the time, and it caused Peter to be distracted, pushing Gwen to date new character Harry Osborn and former rival Flash Thompson, kind of out of a combination of frustration and jealousy. But suddenly, in Amazing Spider-Man number 42 in 1966, we first read those 8 little words that every fanboy wants to hear. Face it, Tiger, you just hit the jackpot, with the iconic introduction of Mary Jane Watson. Created by Stan Lee with designs by John Romita Sr. A party girl with a sordid past, Mary Jane seemed to be the life of the party and interested in casual dating only, which she did with Peter Parker for some time. But Mary Jane's swingin' 60s style was a little too hip for Peter Parker's game, and he broke things off and pursued Gwen Stacy. And succeeded. The pair of star-crossed lovers dated exclusively until 1973 in Amazing Spider-Man number 121, when Gwen Stacy tragically met her end at the hands of Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin. The death of Gwen Stacy would rock the supporting cast for Spider-Man to its very core, which included Mary Jane Watson, who at the conclusion of that story decided to change her ways and become more grounded. Peter and Mary Jane would occasionally date, but something always kept those two apart. Created by Bill Mantlo and Sal Buscema in 1976 in Marvel Team-Up number 48, Jean DeWolf was a hard-ass, no-nonsense, old-school captain of the NYPD. Recognizing the usefulness of Spider-Man was a rare quality in the police department during those days of Spider-Man's comic history, and a breath of fresh air for Spider-Man and for the readers as well. After being assassinated by the Sin Eater, also known as Stan Carter, it was discovered that she harbored a secret crush on Spider-Man, one that Peter Parker admitted he might have reciprocated. One of Spider-Man's first costumed romances came in the form of the Black Cat, who was first introduced in 1979 Amazing Spider-Man 194. Created by Marv Wolfman and Keith Pollard, Felicia Hardy was a cat burglar who Spider-Man ran into on numerous occasions. A mutual interest blossomed, though there was always that caveat of Black Cat being a criminal. But hey, it worked for Batman. Spider-Man saw good in her and occasionally would team up with her to try and reform her and have her criminal record expunged. Unfortunately, her natural ways usually got the better of her, and she often reverted back to type. This didn't stop them from occasionally carrying on a romance together, but it was never initially that serious. Then, in 1979 in Amazing Spider-Man 196, we were introduced to Deborah Whitman. Created by Marv Wolfman and Al Mingram, this young divorcee was a receptionist at the biophysics department of Empire State University. Peter's usual habits of being Spider-Man caused them to break off numerous dates, which caused Deborah Whitman to rethink their relationship. Unfortunately, due to her mental instability, she idealized Peter Parker and in fact imagined him to be Spider-Man, legitimizing his reasons for not being available. In one of the creepier sides of Peter Parker's relationships, her therapist recommended that he masquerade as Spider-Man and then reveal himself to her in an effort to shock her back into reality. Initially refusing because it was a ridiculous idea, Peter saw her state becoming worse and, having no other recourse, went along with this procedure. Afterwards, she did regain her life back, but decided to move away to gain a fresh start. start. In Marvel Team-Up number 80 in 1979, Peter Parker started dating a girl named Sissy Ironwood. Created by Chris Claremont and Mike Vosberg, Sissy was a student at Empire State University and enjoyed collector's items. The relationship wasn't terribly serious and eventually ended shortly thereafter. Eventually, Peter Parker would decide to settle down and propose to Mary Jane Watson, seemingly out of nowhere. Afraid of settling down, Mary Jane rejected the proposal and went away for a while. This would compound Peter Parker's relationship with Felicia Hardy the Black Cat and eventually cause him to reveal his secret identity to her. This sudden expression of trust blew Felicia Hardy's mind, and she rejected him outright and ran away to Europe for a while. After the 1987 crossover book Spider-Man vs. Wolverine, Peter Parker returns from Germany emotionally exhausted after the death of his colleague Ned Leeds and the unintended murder of Wolverine's ally Charlemagne. He bumps into Mary Jane, and after a short reconciliation, he proposes to her yet again, but this time, she agreed! Having revealed shortly before that she always knew Peter Parker was Spider-Man, she had to reconcile those two halves of the same person. The two were wed in 1987 in Amazing Spider-Man Annual number 21. In Peter Parker Spider-Man number 76 in 1997, written by Howard Mackey with art by John Romita Jr., they introduced a new character, Gwen Stacy's cousin Jill Stacy. The two developed a quasi-mutual attraction. They never really went anywhere with it. Created by John Byrne and Raphael Cain and in 1998 in Amazing Spider-Man number 441, Martha Mattie Franklin became a new Spider-Woman character thanks to the Gathering of 5 story arc. While on the job as Spider-Woman, she initiated a romantic intent with Spider-Man, but still grieving over the perceived death of his wife Mary Jane, he rejected her. In Spectacular Spider-Man number 23 in 2005, Gwen Stacy's illegitimate daughter from Norman Osborn, Sarah Stacy, developed a romantic interest in Peter Parker. And while she did manage to plant a kiss, nothing really developed out of that. Then in Amazing Spider-Man number 545 in 2008, after 21 years of stories, the marriage was unmade. In that very issue, new romantic interests were introduced for Peter Parker. Created by J. Michael Straczynski and Joe Quesada, this would include forensic specialist Carly Cooper, who worked for the NYPD and was a closeted Spider-Man fan, and Lily Hollister, socialite and daughter of District Attorney William Hollister. Though she did express interest in Peter Parker, nothing ever really blossomed, as she was Harry Osborn, Peter Parker's newly revived best friend's girlfriend. Though Carly and Peter would eventually grow into a serious relationship, Lily and Peter never really developed into anything. Although Lily did sleep with Norman Osborn and became Menace, Mock Goblin, and Queen Cat. In 2006, they implied a potential romantic link-up between Spider-Man and Ms. Marvel, aka Carol Danvers, in the pages of Ms. Marvel number 34 by Brian Reed, Adriana Mello, and Paulo Siqueira. In this issue, Spider-Man uncharacteristically coerces Ms. Marvel into a date if he helps her defeat some bad guys. Following that, in Ms. Marvel number 47, they actually do go on a date, which goes kind of poorly, but then picks up towards the end as they embrace their real personalities. This superhero matchup kind of reaches its apex in Siege Spider-Man number 1 in 2010. During the assault on Asgard, the Venom symbiote comes in contact with Carol Danvers and gets a quick peek into her emotions, or so he taunts. The two resolve not to let it get too awkward as they fly towards Asgard and give battle once again. This is kind of the limit of the relationship, as there's no real conclusion or any real solid beginning either. Neat idea though. Created by Dan Slott and Steve McNiven in Amazing Spider-Man number 546 in 2008, we were introduced to Mia Flores, a budding socialite searching for fame and fortune through Harry Osborn and using Peter Parker to get there. While they did share a kiss, Peter Parker did reject her. However, she did follow them around for about a year. Eventually, she just kind of goes away. Newly single and slightly destitute, Peter Parker had a string of roommates during that time. And in 2009, in Amazing Spider-Man 592, Mark Waid and Mike McCone introduced us to Michelle Gonzalez. While she was really house-sitting for her brother Vincent, the two actually wound up becoming roommates, and an awkward will-they-won't-they relationship blossomed. In Amazing Spider-Man 600, written by Dan Slott with art by John Romita Jr., Peter and Michelle have a drunken one-night stand after Aunt May and J. Jonah Jameson's father, Jay Jameson's wedding. This relationship was further toxified when the chameleon took over Peter Parker's life and also slept with Michelle Gonzalez, masquerading as Peter Parker. Eventually the two would reconcile, though she would move to Chicago. An odd exception to this alternate reality rule that I imposed on myself is Sarah Bailey from Astonishing Spider-Man and Wolverine from 2010. Created by Jason Aaron and Adam Kubert, Sarah Bailey is basically just a bank teller that was at the wrong place at the wrong time when the Orb used time diamonds to send Spider-Man and Wolverine into the... Well, you know, that actually sounds kind of ridiculous when you say it out loud. Anyway, suffice it to say, a high-flying, time-hopping adventure ensued in which Spider-Man and Sarah Bailey eventually settled down in the Old West, when one of the last remaining time diamonds, which Peter kept and gave to Sarah as an engagement ring, reactivated and took them back to their original timeline only seconds after they left in the first place. While Spider-Man and Wolverine retained their memories from the adventure, Sarah regrettably did not. And so their relationship, and their entire lives together, were lost to the winds of time. Created in 1985 by Ron Frenz and Tom DeFalco in Amazing Spider-Man number 265, Silver Sable was an interesting character that also harbored a secret crush on Spider-Man. A dignitary from the European nation of Simcaria and a mercenary in her own right, Silver Sable and Spider-Man's relationship was typically that of a working relationship. They worked together to fight villains and occasionally engage in a little international intrigue, and the occasional smooch like in Amazing Spider-Man number 679. But in the 2012 Spider-Man event Ends of the Earth, written by Dan Slott with art by Stefano Caselli, Silver Sable uncharacteristically put her heart on her sleeve and admitted that there was something in Spider-Man that she never saw before, something that intrigued her romantically. Unfortunately for her, Spider-Man rebuffed her advances, implying a potential reconciliation between him and Mary Jane. Introduced in Superior Spider-Man number 5 and created by Dan Slott and Giuseppe Camuncoli, Anna Maria Marconi was a physics tutor for Peter Parker when he re-enrolled at Empire State University to achieve his doctorate degree. However, it wasn't Peter Parker at all, but was in fact Otto Octavius who had taken over Peter Parker's mind and body and became the superior Spider-Man. The two began to date seriously, so seriously in fact that Otto Octavius, in Peter Parker's body, planned to propose to her, and picked a fight with Aunt May when she didn't approve. A little person with a gift for physics and cooking. Eventually, the true Peter Parker regained control of his mind and body, and sadly for Anna Maria, the man she loved was gone. Well, not so much gone, but downloaded his consciousness into a D-list Spider-Man villain's artificially intelligent robot body. Introduced in 2014's Amazing Spider-Man number 1, written by Dan Slott with art by Humberto Ramos, Cindy Moon was revealed to be bitten by the same irradiated spider that gave Spider-Man his powers, thereby granting her similar extraordinary abilities. During the original Sin crossover event, Cindy Moon donned a costume and took the name Silk. A byproduct of their mutual connection is that if they're ever in close proximity with each other, they have the overwhelming desire to mate. Inconvenienced by the need to make out like teenagers on prom night, the two decided to remain separate and avoid each other as often as they can. Introduced in the premiere issue of the all-new, all-different Amazing Spider-Man in 2015 by Dan Slott and Giuseppe Camuncoli, we are introduced to Lian Tang, corporate executive Peter Parker's girlfriend and also the designer of the Spider-Mobile. She was recently revealed to be coerced into helping Mr. Negative take down Spider-Man, though Peter Parker and Spider-Man forgave her. So while Peter Parker is famous for being down on his luck, especially in the romance department, the reality is he's actually been quite gifted. And maybe one of the reasons that we as fans are so interested in the many loves of Peter Parker is because we see a bit of ourselves in him. And in other ways, I think that those loves strengthen Peter Parker and make him into a better Spider-Man. Enough said, true believer. Whoa, that one took a lot of work. Thanks a lot for watching, and if you like this video, you can give it a like and subscribe to our channel, and check out everything else we've got here on ComicPOP. We have 5 shows a week. That's Monday through Friday, a brand new show every single day of the week. See you next time.